You probably know him as Richard the Lionheart, the legendary English king, the Crusader hero. But what if I told you that the story you know is just a fraction of the truth? The real Richard was far more complex, and in many ways, far more fascinating than the one-dimensional hero of legend. Today, we're peeling back the layers of myth to uncover the untold story of Richard I. First off, let's talk about his connection to England. We think of him as this quintessential English king, right? Well, he barely spent any time there. In his entire 10-year reign, he was in England for only about 6 months. He didn't even speak English fluently. His primary language was French. He once famously said he would sell London if he could find a beer. So, why was he so absent? Because for Richard, England was less of a home and more of a piggy bank to fund his real passion, warfare. Richard wasn't just a king who happened to go on a crusade, he was a warrior first and a king second. His entire life was a series of battles, rebellions, and strategic maneuvers. Even before he was king, he was fighting. Against whom, you ask often? Against his own family. The royal family of the time, the Plantagenets, were notoriously dysfunctional. Richard, along with his brothers, frequently rebelled against their own father, King Henry II. It was a relentless power struggle. Imagine a medieval soap opera, but with real swords and castles. Richard even allied with his father's greatest rival, the King of France, to secure his own path to the throne. This wasn't just teenage rebellion, it was high-stakes politics played out on the battlefield. When he finally became king, his first order of business wasn't to govern England, but to finance the Third Crusade. He sold off sheriffdoms, titles, and lands, anything to raise the cash needed for his massive army. This is where his reputation as the Lionheart was truly forged. In the Holy Land, he proved himself to be a brilliant military strategist and a fearless fighter. He won major victories, like the Battle of Arsuf, where he crushed the forces of the great Muslim leader, Saladin. But his leadership style was, let's say, abrasive. He was arrogant, hot-tempered, and often alienated his allies. He famously insulted Leopold V, the Duke of Austria, by tearing down his banner at the Siege of Acre. This single act of pride would come back to haunt him spectacularly. While he was a genius on the battlefield, his diplomatic skills were severely lacking. He managed to make enemies not just out of his opponents, but also his supposed partners in the crusade. This infighting among the Christian leaders ultimately weakened their cause and prevented them from retaking Jerusalem, which was the crusade's main goal. Now, let us get to one of the most bizarre and often overlooked chapters of Richard's life, his journey home. Knowing he had made powerful enemies, he couldn't just sail home. He decided to travel in disguise through Central Europe. Yes, the mighty King of England, disguised as a commoner, but his disguise wasn't very good. His royal demeanor and lavish spending habits gave him away. He was captured near Vienna by none other than Duke Leopold of Austria, the very man he had insulted. What followed was a real-life political thriller. Leopold handed Richard over to the Holy Roman Emperor, Henry VI, who demanded a colossal ransom for his release. We're talking 150,000 marks, which was about 2 to 3 times the entire annual income of the English crown. It was an astronomical sum, an amount that could bankrupt a nation. Back in England, his mother, Eleanor of Aquitaine, worked tirelessly to raise the money. She implemented a massive, nationwide tax, confiscating gold and silver from churches and demanding a quarter of every person's income. The whole of England was bled dry to pay for their absent king's freedom. Meanwhile, Richard's own brother, John, yes, the infamous Prince John from the Robin Hood legends, was plotting against him. John teamed up with Richard's old enemy, King Philip of France, and tried to seize the English throne for himself. He even offered the emperor money to keep Richard imprisoned for longer. It's the ultimate story of sibling rivalry and betrayal. After more than a year in captivity, the ransom was finally paid, and Richard was released. You'd think after all that, he'd head straight to England and stay there, right? Wrong. He returned to England for just a few weeks, long enough to be recrowned to reassert his authority and to punish those who had sided with John. And then he was off again, back to France, to wage war against King Philip and reclaim the lands he had lost while he was imprisoned. For the last 5 years of his life, he never set foot in England again. He spent all his time, energy, and England's money fighting in France. This brings us to his death, which was as dramatic and ironic as his life. He wasn't killed in a glorious battle against a great army. In 1199, he was besieging a minor, insignificant castle called Chalais-Chabrol. The story goes that he was after a supposed treasure hoard found there. One evening, Richard was walking around the castle perimeter without his chainmail, feeling overconfident. A lone crossbowman on the castle walls, some say it was just a young boy, took a shot. The bolt struck Richard in the shoulder. At first, the wound didn't seem life-threatening. But the surgeon who removed the bolt was clumsy, and the wound became infected with gangrene. As he lay dying, Richard did something extraordinary. He summoned the crossbowman who had shot him. Instead of ordering his execution, Richard forgave him, praised his bravery, and even ordered that he be given a sum of money. It was a final act of chivalry that cemented his legend. However, after Richard died, his captains ignored his final wish and had the crossbowman brutally executed. So, what is the legacy of Richard the Lionheart? He was a master tactician, a courageous warrior, and the epitome of the chivalric knight. But he was also a neglectful king to England, a terrible diplomat, and a man driven more by personal glory and family feuds than by the welfare of his people. His story is a powerful reminder that history is never black and white. The heroes of legend are often flawed, complex human beings whose real stories are far more compelling than the myths. He was less an English king and more a French warrior who happened to wear the English crown. A lion on the battlefield, but a ghost on the throne. What do you think? Does this change your perception of Richard the Lionheart? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed diving into the real stories behind the legends, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more hidden histories. Thanks for watching.